Melissa Thorne, and joining me today is Roxanne Hemphill. Today's date is May 18th, 2019. Thank you, Roxanne, for being with me today and sharing your memories.
I'm happy. Thanks for having me.
So, can you describe your first memories of Mount Airy and when you came to town?
I was basically born into town. My parents lived here in town. I was born in the hospital in Frederick and lived on Park Avenue. And lived on Park Avenue all my life. And now still continue to live there. My first memories, I guess, were as a child, where we could just, there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood. We played together all the time. We would go out on Saturday morning, go out and play around the neighborhood, go to back and forth to people's different houses, and when it was dinner time, I came home. You know, we didn't have to worry about a lot of cars coming up and down Park Avenue. There wasn't a Route 27. The downtown area just seemed like so far away, and it's just like, I'd say a mile and a half from my house, but it just seemed so far away from my house.
And then you're close by Wildwood Park?
Close by was Wildwood Park. There wasn't a lot to do there at that point. They used to have the carnival there up until 1954, which was the year I was born. So and right next door to Wildwood Park was a good friend of my parents, Mr. Preston Brown and his wife Ida. They actually helped my dad to build my house. That's my phone.
I was so confused. This is really loud in the headphones.
So he also had a swimming pool, and I would swim there all the time. He basically taught me how to swim, and I knew how to swim, but I was afraid to go in the deep end. And one day I was looking in the deep end, and he pushed me in, and I started swimming in the deep end, and have been swimming ever since.
Oh, no kidding.
So, yeah.
They were your neighbors?
Neighbors. They lived up on the hill. He had the pool before even the Ridge Swim Club. I mean, this was before the Ridge Swim Club was there.
Can you recall any of the local gatherings or events that would happen?
The biggest thing was the carnival.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened, it's the last full week in July. It's always been then. Yeah. It was always cool because where Preston Brown's house is, because it was on a hill, that's where the judges' stand was for the parade. And we lived 2 doors down, so it became a huge happening for my family and the people that we invited. We would have dinner, a picnic dinner, and then we'd watch the parade. And the parade would go on for hours. I remember the parades going into the dark. They were so long. And having fire engines have their lights come back up onto Park Avenue and shoot their lights so we could see the people going through. There were tons of floats, bands, majorette groups.
So there was a judge for what would they do? They
were judging the majorettes as they came through, the bands, the fire trucks. You know, that was always neat to see who was there, because they would get an award for the farthest, somebody that came the farthest, excuse me. And so you would, you'd like to see where they were all from. And we still have, it's neat, we still have it today.
It is.
It's very neat. I mean, that's a long time. Mm-hmm. It's been going on for a long time.
What are some other things you used to do for fun as a kid?
Well, we would play in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of organized things for the kids. The boys had the Little League.
Okay.
But it was just play in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's
a great childhood.
It was an awesome childhood. And it didn't matter what time of the year. We had tons of trees. We could, in the fall, rake the leaves, jump in the leaves. We would sled ride down Park Avenue.
Where?
On the street, because there weren't any cars. It was very, before 27, very few cars came up and down Park Avenue.
Goodness.
So we were able to sled ride on Park Avenue.
Mm-hmm. What is the biggest change you've seen in that area over time?
well, 27, I'd say. Route 27 has made a huge change in this town. It brought people here. It brought people to see what the town was like. Brought people here that wanted to live here, that wanted to have the kind of lifestyle that we had. I remember the trials and tribulations of the town council and people at that time trying to decide if we wanted to grow or not. We had to go to Frederick for everything, Frederick or Westminster. Small grocery store in town. And then where Food Lion was, there was a small grocery store. But other than that, we had to go everywhere else. So by having more people come into the town, we did get more services. So that was a good growth thing that happened.
You mentioned the events. Were there any other traditions held in town that you can remember?
Can't really remember. We each had each area kind of had their own thing. We had the Fireman's Carnival, and then the Lions Carnival came back. We've had that. There weren't any parks. Opening day of the Little League, that was huge because the Little Leaguers would meet in Wildwood Park, and they would march down to the ball fields. That was a big event. The Little League was a big event. Anytime, they were having games at night, those were big events in the summer.
And where were they playing?
They were playing, when I was growing up, they were playing at the firemen's grounds there.
Yeah, sort of where they have fields
where they have now.
Set up. Okay. Is there a town resident that you looked up to? Your neighbor you mentioned, and
Preston,
the fun story.
Right. I kind of looked up to Delane Hobbs. He was, at the time, I think he was the council president, not quite sure, but he was very welcoming, very knowledgeable about the town. He was also a photographer. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't know that.
And I took dancing lessons, and every year my mom would take me over. His shop, his photo shop, it's gone. It was there right on the corner of Center Street and Main Street. And my mom worked across the street. But every year I'd get my picture taken in my costumes.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that was, he was your go-to photographer. So.
Tell me more about where your mom worked across the street.
My mom worked across the street and is what is now next to Von Eiffel. When she worked there, it was an insurance and real estate company, Herbert Burdett. He'd been in town for a very long time. My mom graduated in 1948 from what is now Mount Airy Elementary School. And the day after her graduation, she started working here, downtown. She worked the same place for 46 years.
Wow.
So I would, in the summertime, when it was nice, I would come home, I would walk from the middle school. She would allow me to walk from the middle school down to where she works. And I'd go over to Myers Drugstore and sit there and have a cherry Coke the old-fashioned way, where they pour in the syrup.
The grenadine,
oh,
yeah.
Oh, so good. And I would sit there and have a soda with, and talk to the people that were there at the bar, and wait for her to get done work, and then we'd drive home. But it wasn't that far from home.
Where was the drugstore located?
The drugstore is where the museum is now.
Okay.
And Doc Myers was, he was a pharmacist for everybody, and he had three, Sally, Polly, and Marianne. All three girls worked there. I remember all of them working there.
Oh, that's so neat.
Yep.
Can you name any other businesses that might have been around there around that time?
There was a small store where Regal, the insurance, Regal Browning that was a grocery store. Across the street was Boone's Appliances, Electronics. There was a 5 and dime store down the street. There was a lady where the train store is now. That was a clothing store for children, younger children. And let's see. Can't remember anything else. Of course, the fire department was right there in the middle of town.
Right.
Old Town was there.
Okay.
Old Town restaurant was there. That was about it.
Okay.
But it was booming. It was thriving.
So Old Town was basically the only restaurant downtown?
Yes.
Possibly?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
People didn't go out a lot, when I was growing up. You went home. The one neat thing about the town of Mount Airy, they would do, because, a lot of farmers would come into town and do their business here, but they couldn't come during the day because they were working on the farms or whatever. So on Wednesdays, Mount Airy would close at, all the businesses would close at around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then they would reopen again about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And they would stay open for a couple of hours to allow those farmers to come into town so that they could take care of their business.
Mm-hmm.
And the bank did the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so they must have gone home or done their errands
Right.
during that time.
Exactly.
Wow. What were some of the best spots what are some of the best spots to hang out in Monterey today? Jumping forward
To hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like hanging out at home. That's fun. But as far as hanging out, one of the best spots for me to hang out when I was younger was the swim club in the summertime. I was there constantly, every day, because I could walk there.
Yes.
That was fun for me. I think I like actually memories. I like going to memories, and having dinner there. I like hanging out at Starbucks. I meet a lot of people at Starbucks and do a lot of different meetings with people that I need to talk to at Starbucks, because it's an easy place. Everybody knows where a Starbucks is.
It's a good place to meet or
It
to
is.
see people
It
they
is.
wouldn't have expected.
It's a
either.
good place to meet people, and people coming in and out you can see. Mm-hmm.
Have you belonged to any organizations in town? Can you tell me about that?
I have not.
Okay.
My volunteer, I guess, efforts are with my church, which is not in the town of Mount Airy, but it is in Mount Airy. I am one of the members of the founding family. I'm a 5th generation of that founding family, so most of my efforts go towards volunteering at the church and doing things for the church, because the church literally really is my family. When it first started, my cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody, we all went to that church. So it was neat. It was more like a huge family gathering on Sundays than it was church.
What was the name of that church, or is the name of that
It's
church?
Calvary Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm.
They celebrated 125 years about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So they've been there for a while.
They beat us to their
They
establishment.
beat it, right. It was in Woodbine first, that's why.
Can you talk a little bit about going to school in Mount Airy?
Well, that was pretty neat, because at the time that I went, there wasn't, in the elementary school there and up through middle school, there wasn't the division where you had to go Carroll County or Frederick County. Everybody went to Mount Airy. Mm-hmm. Mount Airy Elementary and Mount Airy Middle School. And then there was the choice for you to start out with, to stay with the Carroll County schools, to go to the Mount Airy High School, which was there, but then they made South Carroll, so I went to South Carroll, or to go to the Frederick County side.
You had a choice. It didn't matter where you were.
It didn't matter, but that only lasted about a year and a half, and then they really, when we started growing a little bit, then they decided that really we needed to break.
Okay.
You had a choice, but it wasn't easy to get that choice.
Okay.
As you know, the elementary school is across from the Locker Wagner's Meats, which was a pretty interesting, place for a elementary school to go. And we would actually go there on a field trip. And the elementary school, when I started, was grades like 1 through 8. And there were some of the firemen, junior firemen, the volunteers, and I would remember because they were allowed to leave when the siren went off. They were allowed to leave school and help.
Could you hear the siren from school?
Yes, you could hear. Yeah, oh, yeah, you could hear it. Yeah, you could hear it everywhere. And it was like when you heard the siren, everybody basically stopped a lot because a lot of the businesses in town and people in town were members, were the volunteers, and at that point it was a volunteer department, and it kind of like everything would stop until they would come back. And the siren would keep going until they got enough people to go out on the call.
So everyone would run to the station.
Run to the station. They all eventually, as time and technology became better, they would have the beepers, and then you could hear the beepers going off. But they were allowed to leave school.
Wow. If you had to describe Mount Airy to someone who has never been to our town, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that Mount Airy is a really nice place to live. There's a lot of opportunities here. I think it's great for children. I wish sometimes that the opportunities that are here now were here when I was growing up. It's not without its growing pains, but I think those are good. And it's really just a genuinely nice place to live. You get to know your neighbors. And it's a place where you can really set down your roots and really think about staying for the long haul.
Where would you recommend that they must see or visit a place when they're here?
I think the couple must-sees, especially now, are the caboose, the museums, because that gives, the history of this town is just, when the museum opened and I went down there were a lot of things that it brought back to my mind and to what had happened here. When you just kind of, when you're little and growing up here, things, you don't see everything that's happened. Those are two things. I'd say a must is to have a meal at Old Town. I think that's pretty neat. Those are the things I would say for them to visit.
Okay. And how do you think that the town will change in the next 10 or 50 years? And also, I should mention that you are chairwoman of the Planning Commission now.
Correct, yes.
So maybe you have a little insight how things have been going as far as sitting on the Planning Commission for a while now. What do you see for our future?
Well, I do enjoy sitting on the Planning Commission, and I feel that that's the best way that I can serve my town. With my background and seeing the town as it's grown. And being a business owner myself, I did leave Mount Airy, my husband and I did leave Mount Airy for a while and did have a restaurant in Salisbury, Maryland. But being a business owner and living here, you kind of get the pulse of the people. I think it's an exciting time for Mount Airy. Like I said, we are going to have some growing pains. I know we are. But there's some really exciting new things that people have visions of doing here in the town. I know that not everyone is happy about those things. And I remind people, at one time, I was not happy with you being here. We didn't want other people coming into our little town. So, yes, we're going to have growth pains, but I just see more services for people, more places to go for people. The opportunity for some people who want to live here, I think that I'm a huge proponent of a mixed use where you have a village type of atmosphere where you have commercial and residential. coming together. And walkability, I think it's very important that we concentrate on the walkability. It's called the work-play philosophy, where people work and live and play all in the same area. And that's important. And I think Mount Airy is going towards that.
Kind of taking us back to our roots, where more people were local.
Yes. Although we did play and work and live here, we didn't have the abilities to get, we couldn't go as far as we do now in the living and working. We need to concentrate on the work to bring more people so that they can work here in town. But that's coming, I think, slowly but surely. That's a 10-year. After that, I'm not sure. 50 years, I don't know. I can't imagine what Mount Airy will be like in 50 years.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Roxanne.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
this
you.
has been really a learning experience for me.
Oh, okay.